Ladies and gentlemen, it is a beautiful day for costume and prop making. I'm Anthony at Chaos Rogue Designs, and it brings me great pleasure to present to you our first build guide. Now in this video I'm going to be showing you step by step how to make this. There's going to be a link to the blueprints in the description that you'll need for the video, along with the list of sort of prerequisites that were just before I showed up in the video. But this is definitely more geared towards our beginners, so we're going to be going through quite a few techniques that if you've built the odd one or two things before, you're definitely already going to know how they work, but I want to explain everything properly. Also, as it's our first build guide, it's a learning opportunity for me as well, so if I've missed anything, skipped over anything too much, if there's anything you would like me to do differently for the next build guide, please leave it in the comments, and I'll see what I can do. If you have any questions that I think deem a full video, of course I will do that for you as well. So this video is going to be the build process. The second part of this is going to be a bit shorter, mostly going to be on the painting. As the painting's got a few options as well, I thought it made a bit more sense to do it that way. But yeah, by the end of this video, if you follow the steps, you will be able to make something like this for yourself, and honestly, this is awesome. Anyway, let's get on with it. Alright, so first off, we want to stick the blueprint together. Now, as the blueprint has a border, you'll want to cut the border off where the two pages join so everything lines up without an overlap. And after that, you're going to cut around the entire template. Now, you can use scissors if you prefer, but it makes my video look way more professional if I use a knife, so yeah, I'm using a knife. Alright, so we've cut everything out and now we're annotating the blueprint as well. Now I have annotated this one already. I did actually make a complete video on annotating blueprints. You should definitely go and watch it. But basically, the lower the number is, the thinner that part of the prop is as well. So the first thing we're going to make is this entire shape out of foam. The whole thing is basically number 1, if you like. After that, I'm going to cut off the bits that are labeled number 1, so the bits around the blade, and this hollow part here. And then we're going to make everything that's labeled number 2, and then we'll snip off and snip off. And then before you know it, we've got all the bits that we need. It'll probably make more sense visually, so let's get on with that. Okay, so I'm using 8mm foam for my core. Now this should be enough to keep it rigid without needing a support. Now since mine came on a roll, it's a little bit bent, so make sure you squash it flat if yours is the same. Pro tip, and one tool that no cosplay or prop maker should be without: sewing pins. Now these are a really good way to secure your blueprint to the foam. This won't damage anything either, and seriously, it's really depressing when you tape your blueprint down and rip it getting the tape off. So it's really good for that. And also, if you're pinning your foam down, you can get to the edges really easily to draw around them. When you use tape for that sort of thing, it can be a little bit difficult. And now I'm going to draw around the blueprint with a marker. Now my foam is black, so I need a white marker, but if you've got anything else, a Sharpie will do the trick. Now you've done that, it's time to do some cutting. Now, sharpen your knife every few cuts. I know it sounds like it could be a little bit monotonous. It's a pretty good word, that. But it will give you the best possible finish. You also want to try and keep your blade as straight as possible. Now, I'm going to be real with you guys, this will come with practice, and you may end up tilting the blade as you go around the corners, but if you can try and avoid that, it will give you a better finish. This isn't a race either. If this step takes you a while, that's absolutely fine. If it takes you 15 minutes to cut this part out, but it's clean, I promise you, you'll save more time than that later on, because you won't have very much to clean up. Alright, still with me? Good. Okay, so you've made your kind of first layer, if you like. This is the thinnest piece of your prop. It's actually really nice to see it in this sort of state as well, because you can see how it all makes sense. I didn't really know what this bit was for. It looked a bit weird, but turns out you put your finger in it. That's pretty cool. Now, all I would say is if it's a bit messy around the edges where you have cut it, try and clean it up a little bit first. Dremel, perfect for that. If you haven't got a Dremel, sandpaper is good for that. If you haven't got that, just very, very carefully just coax around it with a knife a little bit. But it's better to do each layer separately when you're cleaning it up. Don't stick it all together and then do the cleaning, because sometimes edges of the foam rip. It's a little bit hard to explain, but trust me on this. Clean up each layer as you go. You will get a better finished prop by the end of it. Well, let's continue where we left off. So, we'll start by removing the areas that I've labelled number 1, so the blade, and also the groove in the middle, but leave the groove until the end. Oh, I should probably mention, if you're using a knife to do straight lines, please make sure that you have a metal ruler. With a plastic one you could cut yourself, and well, we wouldn't want that. You're going to need to cut 2 of everything from now on as well, so you'll need 2 of the shape we're making, 1 to go on each side of the prop. Now, much like we did before, I'm going to transfer this template onto the foam. This time, however, I'm going to be using foam that's 5mm thick. I honestly use 5mm thickness foam the most. Even the core of this prop probably could have been 5mm as well. I just thought it would look nicer being a bit more bold. So make sure you make 2 of these and remember to sharpen your knife every few cuts. Now, after you've cut away the outline for both pieces, you may be wondering, what's the best way to cut that internal groove out? Well, don't worry, I got you covered. Alright, I think you're really going to like this. So this is the second layer. And you can see that the top edges, well, the top edge especially, is very close to the edge of the foam itself. Just be really careful when you cut that bit out. Just make sure you put a lot of pressure on it, and use a ruler, of course, so you don't sort of cut out of the lines at all. Just be really, really careful with that bit, because once you take this chunk out in the middle, it's going to be quite flimsy. Another thing, now, you can use a knife, but the edges of here, the corners, are a little bit rounded, aren't they? You see that? Now, if you've got a really sharp knife and you're very careful, you can cut that shape out and it will look pretty good. The best way, though, if you can find something that is just round to begin with, I've got a kind of pack of brass tubing offcuts. I got to admit, I got it off Amazon, no, eBay actually, and wherever I got it from doesn't even exist anymore. But I'm sure it's not the only place that sells brass offcuts. But I've basically put one on the end of a paintbrush, so I've got a bit of leverage. So this really is a bit of a homemade tool. But this rounded edge here, I compress this through the edges of the foam, so it will go through about... Damn, it's really hard to get that in camera. But it'll go here. So basically, I'm going to press a hole into each side of this, and it will just make sure that the edges are completely rounded. You can do it with a knife. I just thought I would show you how I'm going to do it. And if you have got something like that, then yeah, good clean cuts for you. Now, in my infinite wisdom, I forgot to press record when I was cutting the blueprint for this part. But basically, we've removed everything on the blueprint labelled number 2, which basically means the blade portion of the prop is finished with. We still need 2 of each piece. Now, these little circles on the blueprint are screw holes. Now, you don't really need to worry about cutting a clean circle out of the blueprint for these. It's honestly easier just to cut a little square or triangle out and just press your marker through it. That's going to leave a little mark for you to put a drill or something to cut a hole through later. We really are just repeating the steps we've already gone through with these grip pieces. It's still important to make sure your craft knife is sharp throughout all of this, and with a relatively simple prop, bad cuts are always that little bit more obvious, so take your time. Now, I left my hole punching and grooves on our second layer until the end. Even with sharp tube, I do find this to be a little wearing on the fingers, so take your time, but it really does give an awesome professional finish. Once this step is done though, honestly, congratulations, well done. That's all the cutting in this build taken care of, so good stuff. Now, I've tidied up all of the parts that I've done with a Dremel, the joys of editing. The only reason I'm not showing too much of that is it gets dust everywhere and I'm a little limited to where I can record. By now, you will have every part that goes together to make your prop. So let's take a look at the glue. Let's see how we're going to stick everything together. Now, I went through this at length in my last video. you really should watch it. But I'm using contact adhesive. Now this stuff is great because it gives a super strong bond, but it's also easy to clean up and it dries flat, unlike say hot glue where you can have a few issues if you use a lot of it. Now with contact adhesive, one thing I do like to do is outline on the prop where the glue is meant to be. So I tend to put my bits together and then just draw around them with a marker. Honestly, you don't need to do this. Contact adhesive is pretty easy to clean up, but I always think that if I can avoid making a mess to begin with, yeah, it's just less work for me at the end of the day. So I always just trace everything around with a white marker, or it'll be black for you if you use a different color foam, just to make sure that I'm only gluing the areas that actually need to have glue on them. Now the Evo Stick contact adhesive in particular usually comes with its own sort of spreader. It's like a flat black bit of plastic on top of the can. It's okay, but for doing props and intricate stuff, it's not the best. A lot of people just use an offcut of foam, and honestly that works really well, and you can cut that bit of foam into different shapes if you need something to sort of spread into tighter corners. Now it's just personal preference, but I've always just used a glue spreader. It's like one of the old school ones. It's thin, super easy to clean, and I've never had any issue using these. Just in case it's your first go with contact adhesive, you don't just spread it and press like you would with a normal glue. The idea is you apply an even coat of it to each piece of foam you wish to stick together. Now, wait until it's touch dry. The process takes about 5 minutes. Once both parts are dry, simply push them together, and those two bits of foam are now one. Now the bond is super strong. You will normally break the foam before you'll break that bond, which is great because it means your foam prop is going to stay in one piece, but it's also bad in the sense that if you make any mistakes, they are a little bit tricky to rectify, so just take your time. Alright, well if you've been following the steps from the beginning, you have in your hands a pretty cool prop right now. I'll be showing you how to do some of the painting in the next video. We're going to be doing a more sort of budget option for that. There are a few sort of expensive sprays and whatnot that you can use to paint the props and seal them and things like that, and we're going to be avoiding most of them, going for a less expensive but nonetheless a very effective option. We're going to be using Mod Podge, which I will talk through in the video as well. These builds do take quite a long time to make. These build guides do take a while to sort of edit, and of course have to build the thing as well. But I have really enjoyed doing it, and I plan to do a whole lot more in the future. We also have a Patreon as well. If you want to have a say in what we build in the future, if you want to support the channel financially and have your say that way, then you can do so. It's completely optional. Of course, you don't need to do anything like that, but if you do want to support the channel, then the options are there. Link in the description below, of course. But until then, stick around a couple of days' time. I'll be showing you sort of how I would go about painting something like this. There are loads of options with painting, to be perfectly honest, but I'll show you how at least I would do it, and it will be quite a cost-effective way of doing so as well. So if you've made it this far in the video as well, I assume you liked it. Please like the video and subscribe if you haven't done so already. That would be amazing of you. But anyway, thank you so much. As always, it's been a real treat to make this and share it with you guys. So I will catch you on the next one, hopefully. Chat to you then.